The Horla, by Guy de Maupassant, is a chilling tale of psychological terror and the supernatural, told through the diary of an unnamed narrator. As the protagonist battles an invisible, malevolent presence that seems to drain his willpower and sanity, he grapples with the boundaries between reality and delusion. Set against the backdrop of late 19th century skepticism and scientific curiosity, the story explores themes of madness, alienation, and the haunting fear of the unknown. A masterpiece of suspense, the Horla leaves readers questioning the nature of their own perceptions and vulnerabilities. Now we begin. May 8th. The morning lay warm and golden beneath the boughs of the great plantain tree, its broad leaves casting shadows that fell in shifting arcs upon the ground, a cathedral of green beneath whose dome I spent my hours reclined in idleness. The house before me crouched in its ancient timbers, cradled in the embrace of the land, and I felt the weight of its history pressing against my breast. These roots, they are not shallow. They run deep as the bones of the earth, binding me to this place with ties unseen but unyielding. The soil here is not mere dirt. It is the dust of lives spent and gone, of births and deaths, of toil and laughter and quiet grief. The air itself bears the musk of these labors, the scent of furrowed fields and the memory of hands that have long since stilled. This house, its windows cast wide to the light of the day, is the cradle of my youth. Beyond the road lies the Seine, her waters moving with a stately indifference, a broad artery drawing its life from places unseen, carrying boats that glide like phantoms. Rouen lies to the south, its spires piercing the sky, the bells of its cathedral tolling in mournful harmony. A music that threads through the air and finds me here, even as the wind carries it to and fro. The morning unfolded with a grace I scarce can speak of. About mid-morning I watched as a procession of boats moved upriver, drawn by a steam tug whose exhaust billowed thick into the air. Among them, a Brazilian three-master gleamed like an apparition of purity, its hull a radiant white, its decks immaculate. I raised a hand in greeting, moved by some strange compulsion, as though the beauty of the vessel demanded it. May 12th. The days have turned against me. A fever has taken hold, though slight, yet its burden weighs heavy, dragging my spirit into depths I cannot fathom. There is a shadow upon me, an unnameable force that saps the marrow of my joy. I do not understand it. There are mornings when I wake with a song in my chest, my heart buoyant as if borne on unseen wings. Yet by midday some pall has descended, and I return to my rooms hollowed and bereft, as if some malign spirit has whispered its woes into my ear. What is it that moves through the world, unseen but not unfelt, that changes the air around us and the blood within? The sky's face shifts, the clouds twist in forms unkind, and I feel their presence within my soul. Is it the wind that unsettles me, or the dull hues of the earth, or some fleeting glimpse of decay that speaks to my mortal frame? Who can say? The things we touch unknowing, the sights we pass without looking, the sounds we hear but do not heed, these haunt us, work their will upon us, unseen architects of our disquiet. It is as though the world conspires against us, its influence as pervasive as the air we breathe, touching us in ways we cannot perceive, and shaping us in ways we cannot resist. How vast and unknowable is the mystery of the invisible, a world that lies beyond the meager grasp of our senses. We are blind to the infinitesimal and the immense, to what lies pressed against our noses and what hovers in distant realms. The inhabitants of a star are as hidden to us as those within a droplet of water. Our ears betray us, for they transmute the tremors of the air into notes, fashioning from these raw vibrations a thing called music, a sorcery that renders the mute quiverings of the world a harmony. So too do our other senses conspire in their mediocrity. Our smell is poor beside the hound's, our taste a blunt instrument, unable even to divine the age of a wine. What then might we perceive if we were granted organs of a finer faculty, gifts that could peel back the shroud of the unseen and the unspoken? What new marvels would rise around us? What worlds within worlds revealed at last? May 16th. There is no denying it now. I am ill, dreadfully so. Only weeks past I was hale and strong, but now I am consumed by a fever not of heat, but of spirit, a restless wasting that gnaws at both mind and flesh. There is upon me a grim sensation of peril, an unshakable certainty that something cruel approaches. The air itself seems charged with malice, and my heart quails at the thought of some unseen misfortune gathering to strike. Perhaps it is the herald of a sickness unnamed, a dark seed sown in the tissues of my body, biding its time. May 18th. Today I sought the counsel of my physician, for I can no longer find rest, my nights haunted by the echo of this dread. He measured my pulse and marked my dilated eyes, my trembling nerves, yet found no grave sign in my affliction. A course of cold showers and bromide of potassium is his prescription, as if such remedies might banish the specter that looms over me. Yet I feel no comfort in his assurances. The shadows within me do not relent, and the days lengthen as though to mock my suffering. May 25th. The day wanes, and yet no reprieve finds me, for as the light drains from the sky, a disquiet overtakes me that I cannot name. It coils in the shadows, a presence unseen yet deeply felt, as though the coming of night bears with it some malignant intent. I take my supper hastily, for the act of eating feels a trivial thing against this weight. I open a book to read, yet the words dissolve before me, their shapes meaningless, their purpose lost. I rise and pace the room, an aimless circuit driven by a dread that fills the air itself. My steps echo faintly in the stillness, and I fear them too. At 10, I climb the stairs to my room. There, I bolt the door behind me, as if such paltry defenses could hold back the thing that haunts me. I am seized by a fear of the dark, of the bed itself. I search the room, opening cupboards, stooping to peer beneath the bed's wooden frame. I listen, straining my ears to catch what my senses cannot tell. But to what end? This fear, this trembling, what can it be? The mind rebels against reason. A mere quickening of the blood, some nervous agitation of the body's delicate machinery, and a man is unmade. I lie down at last, surrendering to the bed that feels like a grave, waiting for sleep as a condemned man waits for the stroke of the axe. My heart beats wildly, my limbs quake beneath the weight of the blankets. And then it comes, not as a friend to cradle me in peace, but as a captor, creeping upon me with silent intent. Sleep falls heavy and cold, like a shroud drawn over the face of the dead. For a time, an hour, perhaps more, I am lost in its abyss. Then a nightmare rises to claim me, a thing monstrous in its intimacy. I know I sleep, yet within that dream I feel the room around me, feel the very bed beneath me, and something else, something near. It comes close. It watches. It touches. Its presence presses down upon my chest, a weight I cannot lift. It takes my throat in its grasp, unseen but wholly there. The air is stolen from me, my breath choked in silence. I am trapped in this horror, and no cry can escape me. I struggle, caught in the grip of that awful impotence that binds us in the throes of dreams. I strain to cry out, but my voice is strangled. I will my body to move, but it lies as stone. Desperation takes me, and I summon all my strength, wrenching against the thing that presses on me, that crushes the breath from my chest. But I am powerless, my efforts spent against a force immovable. Then, as if torn from the jaws of some abyss, I wake, my body trembling, my skin slick with sweat. The candle flares to life in my shaking hand, its light revealing nothing but emptiness. I am alone, as I knew I must be, though the knowing is little comfort. The terror passes, and I sink at last into a quieter sleep, one unbroken until the morning sun peers through my window. June 2nd. The days wear on, and my condition worsens. There is a sickness in me, one that the bromide cannot calm, nor the shower baths wash away. I wander now, seeking solace in the woods of Rumar, though my body is wearied past reason. I tell myself that the clean air, rich with the scent of leaves and earth, might stir some vigor within me, might chase this shadow from my heart. One day my steps carried me deeper into the forest, where the trees stood tall and ancient, their branches entwining to form a dark canopy overhead. The path narrowed as I went, and the sky above was swallowed in shades of green and black. The air grew close, and a shiver ran through me, not of cold, but of something deeper, a dread that crept along my spine. I quickened my pace, driven by a sense of unease that grew with every step. The solitude pressed in upon me, heavy and suffocating, and then a new terror gripped me, a certainty that I was not alone. I felt it, the presence at my back, the sound of footsteps, faint but near, so near I could have reached out and touched it. In a rush of panic, I turned, expecting to see some figure, some pursuer close upon me. But there was nothing. The path stretched behind me, a straight, empty corridor between the towering trees, endless and terrible in its stillness. It was the same before me, a void that swallowed all light, all life. The emptiness mocked me, and yet I felt it still, the thing unseen, lingering just out of reach. I closed my eyes, though I cannot say why, as though some unseen compulsion had seized me. Then, without thought, I began to spin on my heel, a motion wild and heedless, turning as a top does when set loose. The world whirled around me, the trees flung into mad motion, the earth itself heaving beneath my feet. A dizziness overtook me, and I stumbled, opening my eyes to a forest that danced in a frenzy. My legs betrayed me, and I sank to the ground. And then, nothing. I could not recall how I had come to this place. The thought struck me as absurd, and yet deeply unsettling. How could I not know? What strange lapses the mind suffers. I wandered, fumbling my way back to the avenue that had borne me into the heart of the wood, the trees now towering and silent in their reproach. June 3rd. Last night was a torment. No rest found me, no solace in the hours of dark. I have resolved to leave, to flee from this malaise, and seek remedy in the motion of the road. A journey might yet mend what the quiet has shattered. July 2nd. I have returned, restored, and untroubled, my spirit eased by the balm of new sights and the rhythm of the wandering days. My travels took me to Mont Saint-Michel, a place that had lived only in my imaginings until now. What wonder overtakes a man at such a sight? I arrived at Avranches as the day waned, and the town itself, perched high upon a hill, seemed but a prelude to the marvel beyond. From its public garden, I looked out upon a bay so vast it might have been the edge of the world. Between two distant hills, their forms softened by mist, lay an expanse of golden sand, endless and luminous beneath the fading sun. And in the heart of this emptiness rose a dark and singular hill, its summit crowned with a strange and solemn edifice. The sun's final glow lit the sky aflame, and against this fiery canvas, the shape of the rock and its monument stood stark, a vision of otherworldly grandeur. At dawn, I set out to approach it, the tide low and the sands stretching wide. Hour by hour I walked, and the abbey rose before me, its vastness growing with every step until it loomed, a colossus born of stone and faith. The rock itself cradles a town, humble beneath the shadow of the towering church above. I climbed its narrow streets, the stones worn smooth by countless feet, until I stood within the abbey itself, a temple unmatched in its artistry and scope. What a thing it is, this sanctuary carved of granite and dream. The halls, vast and vaulted, seem both cavernous and weightless, as if suspended by some unseen grace. Towers rise skyward, their spires laced with stairways that spiral to dizzying heights. Flying buttresses leap from wall to wall, bristling with grotesques, chimeras, devils, creatures of a sculptor's nightmares. Their forms are a defiance of heaven, yet they seem to hold the very sky aloft. By day, their shadows play upon the pale stone. By night, they disappear into the inky void above. The abbey is a monument to God, yes, but also to the hand of man, who dared to build this fragile wonder upon the unyielding rock. It is a place where the earthly and the divine meet, a miracle wrought of stone and sky. At the summit, I turned to the monk who had accompanied me, his robes fluttering in the ceaseless wind that raked the height. "Father," I said, "how happy you must be here, in this place of such grandeur and peace." He glanced at the horizon, the tide creeping in below us like liquid steel sheathing the sand. "It is very windy, monsieur," he replied. And so we talked, our words carried on the breath of that wind, as we watched the sea reclaim the earth in slow and relentless strokes. The monk spoke then of the legends, stories as old as the stone beneath our feet, worn smooth by the passing of centuries. He told me of the Mornet folk, their tales of strange voices carried on the night air, of goats that bleat with voices strong and weak, their cries like something torn from the human throat. The skeptics dismiss these as the wails of seabirds, those ragged creatures whose screams mimic both the animal and the lamenting soul. But the fishermen, those men who live by the fickle grace of the tides, they swear to stranger things. They speak of a shepherd who walks the sands in the hours between tides, his face obscured by the folds of his cloak, a figure of shadow and silence. He leads a he-goat with the face of a man and a she-goat with the face of a woman, their hair white as foam on the breakers. These goats quarrel ceaselessly in a tongue unknown, their voices sharp and alien, and then, without warning, they fall silent, their arguments giving way to bleats so fierce they pierce the soul. "Do you believe such things?" I asked, watching the monk's face. He hesitated, his expression unreadable. "I scarcely know," he said at last. And I, troubled by his uncertainty, pressed on. "If there are others, beings beyond our understanding, how is it we have never seen them? Why have you not seen them? Why have I not?" The monk's gaze turned skyward, his voice calm as the breeze tore at his words. "Do we see the 100,000th part of what exists? Consider the wind. It is the mightiest force upon the earth. It fells men, raises forests, dashes the seas to ruin, shatters the cliffs, and sends ships to their doom. It kills, it wails, it roars. Yet have you ever seen it? Can you see it? It is there nonetheless." I fell silent, unable to answer. His words rang true, simple, and unassailable, though I could not decide if they belonged to wisdom or folly. They mirrored thoughts I had long harbored, but dared not voice. July 3rd. The night passed poorly. There's a fever in this place, an invisible malady that drags the mind into dark waters. Even my coachman Jean is afflicted. When I saw him yesterday, his face was pale as bone. "What ails you, Jean?" I asked. He hesitated, his eyes hollowed by some unseen torment. "I do not rest, monsieur. My nights devour my days. Since your absence, a spell has fallen over me, and I cannot shake it." The other servants seem untouched, but his words have left a shadow in my thoughts. I dread the return of my own affliction, and I fear its grip upon me will tighten before long. July 4th. The nightmare has returned, more vivid and consuming than before. In the dead of night I felt it, a weight upon me, a presence both intimate and malevolent. It leaned close, its breath hot and cloying, its mouth pressed to my flesh. I could feel it drawing something from me, pulling life itself through the veins of my neck, as a leech drains its victim. When at last it rose and left me, I awoke, shattered, my body broken as though I had been beaten with iron rods. I lay motionless, every limb crushed beneath the memory of its touch. If this horror does not abate, I will have no choice but to flee again, for my strength will not hold. July 5th. Have I lost my reason? My mind spins, torn by the memory of what I witnessed last night, a thing so strange that my thoughts unravel each time I return to it. As is now my habit, I locked my door before retiring, ensuring no hand but my own could breach my solitude. Thirsting, I drank half a glass of water, and by chance noted the bottle stood full to its cut glass stopper. Sleep took me then, that heavy, unnatural slumber, and I sank into its grasp only to be torn awake 2 hours later by a shock so violent it seemed death itself had come for me. Imagine, if you can, a man roused from sleep as if a blade had pierced his chest, choking on his own breath, the room spinning in madness around him. Such was my waking, a terror without comprehension. When I could move, I reached for the water, desperate to soothe my parched throat. But when I tipped the bottle, it was dry, completely dry. I stared at the empty vessel, the comprehension of it dawning slowly, as though the mind itself recoiled from the truth. Who had drunk it? I? Could it only have been me? The thought crushed me with its terrible implication. If I had done this thing, it was not in waking life, but in that other state, that shadow realm where another version of myself walks unbidden. A somnambulist, a sleepwalker, what else could it mean? Yet in that state I become a stranger even to myself, my body an instrument in the hands of an unknown force. Who is this other who wears my flesh, who acts beyond my will? Is he of me or something wholly apart? The weight of this question held me in its grip until dawn broke pale and cold. I dared not return to bed, for fear of what I might become. July 6th. I am slipping into madness. Last night, the bottle was full again, when I lay down. Yet by morning, the water was gone. This time I had no memory of thirst, no awareness of the act, but still the evidence stared back at me, crystalline and damning. Is it I? Could it be another? Am I haunted not by my own shadow, but by some other presence, invisible and cruel? My mind reels, my sanity cracks beneath the strain of these questions, unanswered and unanswerable. July 10th. Madness, or something beyond it, something worse. I have tried to unmask the mystery with deliberate experiments, each one deepening my dread. On the night of the 6th, I placed a banquet of sorts upon my table. Wine, milk, water, bread, and strawberries. By morning, the water was gone, as before, and some of the milk. But the wine was untouched, the bread and fruit left whole. On the 7th, I repeated the test, and the same pattern emerged. On the 8th, I removed the water and milk entirely, and nothing was disturbed. Last night, I prepared anew, wrapping the bottles of water and milk in white muslin and binding their stoppers tightly with string. I covered my lips, my beard, and my hands with pencil lead, marking myself so that any act in sleep would betray me. Sleep claimed me as before, its weight dragging me into the abyss, and when I woke it was to the same grim realization. The muslin was undisturbed, the string unbroken. My sheets bore no trace of movement, my body unmarked. Yet the water was gone, the milk drained to the last drop. What can this mean? What force could drink in silence, without hands, without lips? The answer lies beyond me. But I cannot remain here, in this place of shadows and whispers. I leave for Paris at once, for fear that another night here will undo me entirely. July 12th. Paris. The fever that gripped my mind these past days has lifted, the shadows dissolved in the bright tumult of this city. It seems now that I was the plaything of my exhausted imagination, though I cannot dismiss the notion that I may have been a somnambulist, or worse, the victim of some invisible influence. Hypnotic suggestion, perhaps, that we know exists but cannot yet explain. Whatever the cause, my state had edged close to madness. But a single day here in Paris has restored me to reason. Yesterday, I busied myself with tasks that filled my thoughts with fresh air and vigor. After tending to my affairs and calling upon acquaintances, I ended the evening at the Théâtre Français, where a drama by Alexandre Dumas fils was performed. Its brilliance, its raw power, seemed to complete my cure. Solitude is a perilous thing for an active mind. In its void, we conjure phantoms to fill the silence. Among others, in the company of thinking men and women, those phantoms vanish. Walking back to my hotel along the bustling boulevards, I reflected on my terrors of the previous week. How absurd they seemed now, the fears and imaginings of an unsteady mind. I had believed, yes, truly believed, that an unseen being dwelled in my house, sharing my roof. How fragile the mind is, how swiftly it falters before the unknown. A small, incomprehensible fact will unbalance us, and instead of accepting our ignorance, we conjure mysteries and horrors to explain it. July 14th. Fate of the Republic. The streets were alive with flags and fireworks, and I wandered among the revelers, amused as a child might be. Yet how foolish it is, this enforced gaiety decreed by the state. People are like sheep, docile and unthinking, now in quiet submission, now in wild revolt. Tell them, rejoice, and they rejoice. Tell them, kill your neighbor, and they kill. Tell them, Bow to an emperor, and they bow. Tell them, vote for a republic, and they vote. Even those who govern them are fools. They do not bow to men, but to principles, and principles are no more than ideas we pretend are unassailable truths. Yet in this world there is no certainty. Light itself deceives, sound betrays. All we take for granted is illusion. July 16th. Yesterday I saw and heard things that unsettled me deeply. I dined with my cousin, Madame Sable, whose husband commands the 76th Chasseurs at Limoges. Among her guests was a young woman married to a physician, Dr. Parent, who has immersed himself in the study of nervous disorders and the strange phenomena arising from hypnotism and suggestion. Dr. Parent spoke at length about the experiments being conducted by English scientists and the doctors of the Nancy School. The accounts he gave were so extraordinary that I found myself compelled to declare my disbelief. He smiled at my skepticism. "We stand," he said, "on the brink of uncovering one of the most profound secrets of nature. On this earth, at least, for assuredly the stars hold their own mysteries. Since the dawn of thought, man has sensed a veil between himself and a deeper reality, a barrier his coarse senses cannot penetrate. He has tried, through intellect, to reach beyond this barrier. In its infancy, that intellect created crude forms to explain the unknown. Spirits, fairies, ghosts. Even our conception of God, passed down by every religion, is no more than the terrified imaginings of primitive minds." He paused, then added with a faint smile, "Voltaire said it best. If God made man in his own image, man has certainly repaid the compliment." His words stirred something within me, an unease that lingers still. If the intellect of man is but a dim candle in the vast darkness, what truths remain hidden from our grasp? What forces move unseen among us, their influence felt but never understood? "But for more than a century now," Dr. Parent said, his tone measured, "there has been a stirring in the depths of human knowledge, a sense of some undiscovered truth drawing near. Mesmer and others like him glimpsed it first, their crude experiments hinting at the hidden powers of the mind. And now, in the last few years, we have achieved results that border on the miraculous." My cousin, ever the skeptic, smiled with a faint air of derision. Undeterred, the doctor turned to her. "Would you allow me to attempt something, madame? To send you to sleep?" She laughed softly and replied, "Yes, certainly. Why not?" She seated herself in an armchair, her expression still one of amused disbelief, and the doctor began his work. His eyes locked on hers with an intensity that seemed almost physical, as though his gaze itself could reach across the space between them and press upon her will. The air in the room grew heavy, charged with a strange energy, and I, though merely an observer, felt its weight. My heart quickened, my throat constricted as though some unseen hand clutched at it. Madame Sable's demeanor shifted before our eyes. Her eyelids drooped, her mouth trembled faintly, and her chest rose and fell in uneven breaths. Within 10 minutes she was asleep. Her form slackened as if all tension had drained from her. "Go behind her," the doctor instructed me. I hesitated, but obeyed, taking a seat behind her chair. He placed a visiting card in her hands and said, "This is a looking glass. What do you see in it?" In a voice both soft and unerring, she replied, "I see my cousin." "And what is he doing?" "He is twisting his mustache," she said. A chill ran through me, for I had been doing precisely that. "And now?" the doctor pressed. "He is taking a photograph out of his pocket." My breath caught. This, too, was true. The photograph had been given to me earlier that evening. "Whose photograph is it?" "His own," she answered. "And what is his pose in this portrait?" "He is standing with his hat in his hand." Each word fell like a weight, undeniable in its accuracy. She saw these things, not in the room, not with her eyes, but in that small, blank card, as if it were a mirror to the unseen. The young women in the room gasped, their faces pale with fear. "That is enough," one cried, her voice trembling. "Quite enough." And indeed, it was enough. Enough to unsettle the firm ground beneath reason, enough to remind us how thin the veil is that separates the known from the unknown. The doctor's voice carried a weight of authority as he addressed my cousin in her trance. "You will rise tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. Then you will go to your cousin's hotel and ask him to lend you the 5,000 francs your husband has requested for his upcoming journey." He spoke with the calm certainty of one delivering fate itself. Then with a simple gesture he roused her from her sleep. The strangeness of the séance followed me back to my hotel, lingering like a shadow on the edge of my thoughts. My cousin's sincerity was beyond question. I had known her since childhood, her honesty as familiar to me as my own reflection. Yet doubts assailed me nonetheless, doubts of the doctor's methods. Had he concealed some small mirror in his palm, showing her reflections under the guise of suggestion? The cleverest conjurers have their tricks, their sleight of hand, and this felt no less uncanny. I went to bed, troubled, but resolved to dismiss it as an artifice of performance. But at 8:30 the next morning, my footman entered my room, his expression uncharacteristically grave. "Madame Sable wishes to see you at once, monsieur." I dressed hurriedly, my unease growing with each moment, and descended to meet her. She sat in the parlor, her face veiled, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her very posture bespoke tension, and when she spoke, her voice trembled as though the words themselves pained her. "My dear cousin," she began, her eyes fixed on the floor, "I must ask a great favor of you." I frowned, uncertain. "What is it, cousin?" She hesitated, visibly struggling. I do not like to tell you, and yet I must. I am in urgent need of 5,000 francs. I stared at her, stunned into silence. "You?" I said at last. "Yes, or rather my husband. He has asked me to procure the amount for him." My mind reeled. The doctor's words echoed in my ears, his commands playing out now with a precision that seemed impossible. Could this truly be coincidence? Or was I the victim of some elaborate jest? Yet when I studied her closely, my doubts wavered. Her whole body quaked under the weight of her request. Her voice strained, her breath uneven. Her misery was palpable. No performance but a raw and unguarded pain. "You are certain," I said carefully, "that your husband needs this sum?" She hesitated, her brow furrowed in thought, as though she were struggling to recall something distant and obscured. "Yes," she said finally. "Yes, I am certain." "He wrote to you?" Again she paused, the silence stretching long enough for doubt to creep between her words. Then she nodded. "Yes, he wrote to me." "When?" I pressed. You mentioned nothing of it yesterday." "This morning," she said hurriedly, her voice faltering. "I received his letter this morning." "May I see it?" Her hands trembled, and for a moment she seemed on the verge of breaking entirely. Then she shook her head, the motion quick and unconvincing. "No, no. It contained private matters, things personal to us alone. I burned it." I felt a chill spread through me at her reply, her lie as plain as the fear in her eyes. This was no jest, no mere coincidence. Something had reached into her mind, planted the seed of this request, and made it bloom. The evidence was before me, undeniable and unnerving. "So your husband has debts?" I asked, my voice sharp with suspicion. She faltered again, her hands twisting in her lap. I do not know," she murmured, her voice barely audible. I leaned forward, my patience fraying. "I'm sorry, my dear cousin, but I do not have 5,000 francs at my disposal at this moment." At that, she cried out, a sound like pain breaking from her throat. Oh, I beseech you, I implore you," she cried, clasping her hands before her as though in prayer. Her voice cracked, her composure crumbling under the weight of the command she could not resist. Her pleas rose to sobs, her words spilling out in a torrent of desperation. "If you knew what I am suffering, I must have it, today." Her anguish softened me, despite my doubts. "You shall have it, I swear to you," I said at last, though the words came with difficulty. Her face lit with gratitude, and she seized my hand. "Oh, thank you. Thank you. You are so kind." I hesitated, my mind circling back to the events of the night before. "Do you remember what happened at your house last night?" I asked her carefully. She nodded. "Yes." "Do you remember that Dr. Parent put you to sleep?" Again a hesitant yes. "Then you must understand," I said, my tone firm, "that he commanded you to come to me this morning and ask for these 5,000 francs. You are obeying his suggestion now, without realizing it." Her brow furrowed in confusion, and she seemed to wrestle with my words. But after a long silence, she replied, "But it is my husband who needs the money." For an hour I tried to reason with her, to break through the fog that clouded her understanding, but it was no use. When at last she departed, exhausted and troubled, I resolved to confront the doctor. I found him preparing to leave his house, but he paused to hear me out, a knowing smile playing at the corner of his lips. When I finished recounting the morning's events, he simply asked, "Do you believe me now?" "Yes," I admitted reluctantly. "I cannot deny it." "Then let us go to your cousin's." We returned to her house, where we found her lying on a couch, pale and drained from her ordeal. The doctor approached her with calm authority, examining her pulse, then raising a hand before her eyes. Slowly they fluttered closed as he wove his strange, magnetic influence around her once more. When she was deeply asleep, he spoke. "Your husband no longer needs the 5,000 francs. You will forget that you asked your cousin for them. If he speaks of it, you will not understand him." When he roused her, I tested his work. I took out my pocketbook and said, "Here is the money you asked me for this morning." Her reaction was instant and unfeigned. She stared at me in utter bewilderment. "What money? What are you talking about?" I pressed her, recounting the events of the morning, but her confusion turned to indignation. She denied it all, her tone sharp with offense. and I saw no choice but to drop the matter before her temper rose further. The truth of what had occurred left me shaken, though I dared not speak of it again. Whatever unseen power the doctor wielded, it moved beneath the surface of reason, like a dark tide pulling against the known world. July 19th. I have returned from my cousin's house, my appetite ruined, my nerves unsettled. The experiment weighs heavily on my mind, its implications too strange to digest. July 21st. Those to whom I've recounted the tale have mocked me. Their laughter echoes in my ears, leaving me uncertain, my thoughts wavering between reason and the impossible. The wise man says, perhaps. This evening I dined at Bougival and later attended a boatman's ball on the Ile de la Grenouillère. It is remarkable how place shapes our beliefs. To entertain notions of the supernatural in such a setting would be absurd, surrounded as I was by music, laughter, and the ordinary joys of life. But at Mont Saint-Michel, beneath its ancient shadows, or in the mystic landscapes of India, the unseen feels close, oppressive. I am determined to return home next week to set my mind to order. July 30th. I have returned at last to my house. All appears well. August 2nd. The days pass uneventfully. The weather is fine, and I spend my time watching the Seine flow by, its waters a silent companion to my thoughts. August 4th. There is discord among my servants. They claim that glasses are breaking in the cupboards at night, each accusing the other of the mischief. The footman blames the cook the needlewoman, and the needlewoman casts her blame back on them both. The truth is elusive, and I lack the will to unravel it. August 6th. I'm not mad. No, I have seen it. Seen it with my own eyes. There can be no doubt now. It was midday, and I was walking in the garden among the rose bushes. The sun was high, its light falling on the autumn blooms that hung heavy with the season's last colors. I paused before a Jean de Bataille, marveling at its 3 perfect roses. Their red so vivid it seemed almost unreal. As I gazed, the stem of one bloom bent suddenly, as though pressed by an unseen hand. My breath caught in my throat as the rose broke free, the severed flower rising gently in an arc, as if carried toward an invisible mouth. There, it hung in the air, a crimson stain against the bright day, no more than 3 yards from me. Desperation seized me, and I lunged at it, my arms outstretched. I found nothing. It was gone. I stood frozen, rage and horror warring within me. It is not natural, not healthy, for a man of sound reason to witness such things. I searched the bush, and there, on the ground beneath it, lay the freshly broken stalk, its edge raw and damp with sap. I returned to the house trembling, my thoughts racing. I am no longer plagued by doubts. This being exists. It lives near me, beneath my roof. It drinks my milk, my water. It moves among my possessions, touching them, shifting them. It has a form, a presence, though it remains unseen. August 7th. I slept soundly last night. The water from my decanter was gone by morning, but my rest was undisturbed. Still, as I walked by the river today, doubts arose. Not the vague uncertainties that have hounded me before, but clear and certain questions about my sanity. I have known madmen, men who were brilliant and articulate, lucid in all but one thought. Their minds navigated the seas of reason until they foundered on the rocks of their delusion, where they were dashed apart, lost to the swirling chaos of madness. Am I such a man? Does my reason sail steady until it meets this one impossible belief and shatters? Or is there truly something here? Something real that eludes the understanding of others? The question lingers like a shadow at my back, dark and insistent. I would believe myself mad, absolutely and irredeemably mad, were it not for the clarity with which I observe and dissect my own state. I see it with unflinching lucidity, analyze it as one might study the anatomy of an affliction. If madness had overtaken me, I reason, I would not possess this awareness. Instead, I am a reasonable man trapped within the grip of a singular delusion. Some unknown disturbance must have erupted in my mind, a fracture in the delicate mechanism of thought. Physiologists speak of such disruptions, the ways in which the brain may falter, its instruments of perception bending or breaking under pressures unseen. Perhaps this disturbance has cleaved a deep chasm within me, upsetting the orderly logic of my ideas. Such phenomena are not without precedent. In dreams, the improbable becomes mundane, the impossible commonplace, for the faculties that verify and question lie dormant, while the imagination weaves its phantasmagoria unchecked. Could not some subtle key of my mind, one of those imperceptible levers of reason, have been paralyzed? I think of men who lose the ability to recall names or verbs or numbers, their thoughts fragmented by some accident or malady. If this can occur in memory, why not in perception? Could my ability to distinguish the real from the hallucinatory have been similarly disabled? I pondered all this as I walked by the water, the sun's golden light dancing on the river's surface. The day was resplendent, and for a while I felt at peace, filled with affection for the world. The swallows darting with effortless grace, the rustle of plants at the river's edge, the small, perfect music of life. But as I walked, a strange unease settled over me, an oppressive weight like a hand on my shoulder. It was as if some unseen force reached out to me, beckoning me, halting my steps and calling me back. A pang of dread took root in my chest, like the fear one feels for a loved one left in sickness, the inexplicable certainty that some calamity awaits. I turned back, compelled by this nameless premonition. I returned home braced for bad news, a letter, a telegram, some tangible proof of my dread. Yet there was nothing, no message, no catastrophe, and still the unease lingered. The absence of explanation was more unsettling than another vision might have been. August 8th. Last night was torment. He does not show himself any more. He does not appear, does not move objects or break the silence. And yet I feel him closer than ever. He is here, watching, his presence more suffocating for being unseen. I feel his gaze, his influence pressing against my thoughts, bending them. His hidden presence is worse than any manifestation. It invades my very soul. And yet somehow I slept. August 9th. Nothing happened, but fear clings to me like a shadow. August 10th. Nothing still. But what will tomorrow bring? August 11th. Nothing again. I cannot endure this state of waiting, this silent oppression. I will leave, flee this house and its invisible inhabitant. August 12th. Night has fallen. The day has been one of frustration and defeat. All morning I resolved to leave, to undertake the simple act of taking a carriage to Rouen. But I could not. Each time I made to rise, to pack, to summon the carriage, I found myself paralyzed. Something holds me here, a force stronger than my own will. August 13th. It is as though the springs of my very being have been broken. My body feels hollow. my limbs without strength, my blood thin as water. Yet it is not my physical form alone that falters. It is my soul, my will. I can no longer summon the energy to act, nor the resolve to command myself. Some other will directs me now, moving my limbs as if I were a puppet. My thoughts are not my own. I obey without knowing why. What has taken me? What has drained the essence of my freedom? I do not know. I am lost, my identity stolen by the silent, relentless power that surrounds me. August 14th. I am lost. My soul no longer belongs to me. Another commands it, governs my every act, thought, and impulse. I am a slave to an invisible master, a horrified witness to my own enslavement. I want to move, to leave this chair where he keeps me bound, but I cannot. The will is mine, but the power is his. The chair holds me fast, as though fused to the floor, and I am as helpless as a stone set in mortar. Then suddenly, without warning, the compulsion shifts. A new command fills me. I must go to the foot of the garden to pick strawberries, and I must eat them. I have no choice. I rise, my body no longer my own, and I obey. My hands pluck the fruit. My mouth consumes it. My terror mounting with every act performed under his dominion. Oh my God! If you are there, if you exist, deliver me from this torment. Have mercy. I plead for salvation, for reprieve, for escape from this incomprehensible horror. August 15th. This is how it must have been for my poor cousin when she came to beg me for those 5,000 francs. She too was possessed, her will overtaken by this parasitic, domineering soul that slips inside and takes control. What is this being? Who is he? Invisible beings exist. This much is clear. But why have they never before revealed themselves in this way? The world is ancient, its history vast, yet nothing I have read or heard resembles what is happening to me. Why now? Why me? If I could flee this house, abandon it forever, I might find salvation. But he will not let me leave. August 16th. Today I escaped. For 2 blessed hours I was free, like a prisoner who stumbles upon an unlocked door. The chains fell away, the oppressive weight of his presence lifted, and I acted quickly, ordering the horses hitched. "To Rouen," I said to the coachman, the words like a hymn of liberation. The city, bustling and alive, greeted me with its noise and movement, a sanctuary from the grip of my tormentor. I went to the library and sought Dr. Hermann Herestauss's treatise on the unknown inhabitants of the ancient and modern world. But as I climbed back into the carriage, intending to flee farther, to the railway station, to anywhere, my voice betrayed me. I shouted, not spoke, but shouted so loud that passers-by turned in alarm. "Home!" The word came unbidden, forced from my throat, and I collapsed onto the cushions, despair coursing through me. He had found me, reclaimed me, and dragged me back into his control. August 17th. What a night. And yet perhaps I should take solace in the knowledge I have gained. I read until the early hours, devouring Herestauss's writings. He chronicles the histories and manifestations of invisible beings, those that haunt the edges of man's imagination, lingering in dreams and superstitions. Herestauss speaks of their origins, their realms, their powers. Yet none among the entities he describes matches the one that plagues me. It is as though humanity, from the first stirrings of thought, has sensed the approach of a new being, a successor, stronger than man, waiting to claim the world. In its terror, mankind has conjured myths and phantoms to explain this foreboding, this looming presence it cannot define, But he is not a phantom. He is real, and he is here. What am I to do against such a force, against a will so absolute that it bends my own as easily as the wind bends the grass? I do not know. I am trapped, adrift in this horror with no anchor and no escape. Having read until 1 a.m, my mind restless and fevered, I went to the open window to let the cool night air soothe my brow and quiet my thoughts. The night was warm and still, the kind that once would have brought me peace and joy. The moon was absent, but the stars blazed above, their light like needles pricking the black sky. I gazed at them and wondered, who lives there beyond our reach? What shapes, what beings, what forms of life inhabit those far worlds? Do their thinkers know truths that elude us? Can they see what we cannot? Might one among them one day cross the void to claim this fragile earth as their own, as the Norsemen once crossed the seas to conquer weaker peoples? We are so small, so fragile, so ignorant, mere specks clinging to this spinning ball of mud, suspended in the vast liquid air of space. Lost in these thoughts, I fell into a restless sleep at the window, only to be awakened after what seemed like no more than 3/4 of an hour. My eyes opened, and though I didn't stir, I was seized by a sensation unlike any I had ever known, a feeling of strangeness, as if the air itself had changed. At first I saw nothing unusual, but then I noticed the page of the book lying open on my table. It moved. Slowly, soundlessly, it turned itself over, as though unseen fingers had lifted it. No breeze stirred the room. The night was utterly still. I watched, every nerve in my body tense. Then, after a few minutes, it happened again. Another page lifted, hovered, and fell softly onto the others. My chair, standing empty near the table, seemed suddenly less empty. I knew he was there, sitting in my place, reading the book that had occupied my thoughts. A wild fury overtook me, an animal rage that consumed every rational thought. With a great leap, I flung myself across the room, intent on seizing him, on strangling him, on destroying him with my own hands. My chair tipped over violently, as though something unseen had risen from it in haste. The table rocked. My lamp fell and extinguished itself. The window slammed shut as if some intruder, startled, had fled through it into the night. He had escaped me. He had fled. He was afraid. For the first time, the thought filled me with savage triumph. He fears me. If not today, then tomorrow, or someday soon, I will catch him. I will trap him, hold him fast, and crush him into the ground like a dog that has turned on its master. August 18th. I have thought about him all day. Yes, I will submit for now. I will yield to his commands, follow his will, humble myself before his strength. He is the stronger, for now. But the hour will come when he will falter, and I will strike. August 19th. Now I know. This morning I read something in the Revue du Monde Scientifique that shook me to my core. A curious report reaches us from Rio de Janeiro. An epidemic of madness, akin to the mass hysteria that swept through Europe during the Middle Ages, is currently raging in the province of São Paulo. The terrified inhabitants are abandoning their homes, fleeing their villages, leaving their lands untended. They claim to be pursued, possessed, governed like cattle by invisible but tangible beings. A kind of vampire that drains their life as they sleep, feeding on their vitality and sustaining itself on water and milk, while shunning all other nourishment. It is real. He is real. And I am not alone. There are others like me, haunted, pursued, dominated by this new terror that has risen in the world. August 19th. Professor Don Pedro Henriquez, accompanied by a team of medical savants, has departed for the province of São Paulo to investigate the origins and manifestations of this alarming epidemic of madness. His aim is to advise the emperor on measures to restore the afflicted population to reason. So reads the Revue du Monde Scientifique. And now the truth strikes me with the force of a blow. I remember the Brazilian three-master, brilliant and white, that sailed past my windows on the Seine on the 8th of May. How I admired its beauty, its luminous purity. And he was aboard. Yes, the being was there. He saw me. He saw my house, gleaming white like the ship itself, and from its deck he leapt to shore, unseen but not unfelt. He came to me. He chose me. Oh, the horror! Now it is clear. The priests who trembled and whispered prayers of exorcism, the sorcerers who invoked him in their rituals on moonless nights, they feared him even as they longed to summon him. Through centuries of dread and awe, men gave him names and forms. Gnomes, spirits, genii, fairies. They cloaked him in the monstrous and the divine, painting him in shadows they could not comprehend. Then the age of enlightenment dawned, and man refined his vision. Mesmer caught a glimpse of his power. Physicians played at understanding it, coining terms to name his influence. Mesmerism, hypnotism, suggestion. They toyed with the force that he commands, the domination of one will over another, unwittingly wielding the weapon of their future lord. And now he has come. He has no name fit for mortal tongues, but I hear it in my mind, though I cannot shape the sound aloud. He is the Horla. Yes, that is his name, the Horla. The reign of man is over. As the vulture consumes the pigeon, the wolf the lamb, so the Horla shall consume man. He will subjugate us as we have subjugated the horse, the ox, the dog. We shall be his chattel, his slaves, his sustenance, bent beneath the power of his will. Woe to us! Yet even the tamed beast may rebel. The ox gores the farmer, the horse throws the rider. I too shall resist. But first I must see him, know him, touch him. How can I fight what I cannot perceive? The eyes of man are feeble, blind to the world's many truths. The monk's words at Mont Saint-Michel return to me. Can we see the 100,000th part of what exists? The wind, which is the mightiest force of nature. Have you seen it? You cannot, yet it exists, and its power is undeniable. Yes, the wind. It uproots trees, tears ships apart, crushes cliffs into dust. Invisible but real. Why then should I doubt the existence of the Horla simply because my eyes cannot see him? My sight is so weak, it cannot even perceive transparent glass. I would walk into it as a bird crashes into a window pane, deceived by clarity. How many truths pass unseen before us, too fine or too strange for our senses to grasp? The Horla is here. He is real, though his form evades me, his essence blending with the light, invisible, yet present. How can I fight such a thing? How can I triumph over the force that now holds my soul in its grasp? I do not know. But I must. I must. A new being, why not? Was it not inevitable that something beyond us should come? Why should we presume ourselves the pinnacle, the final step in the grand and endless chain? The reason we do not see him is simple. He is finer, more subtle, more perfect than we. His form crafted with a delicacy beyond our coarse comprehension. Look at us, burdened by this crude, unfinished vessel we call a body. Our organs groan with strain, faltering under the weight of life, like overcomplicated locks that cannot withstand their own mechanisms. We feed ourselves with difficulty, clinging to air, plants, and flesh like starving brutes. Our bodies are plagued by malformations, diseases, decay, a machine that limps and stutters, simple yet unwieldy, fragile yet grotesque. We are not the culmination of creation, but its rough draft, a shadow of what might one day be intelligent and grand. The world has climbed so few steps, from the oyster to man. Why should there not be another? One more rung on this ladder of existence? Why not new creatures, beings that surpass us in ways we cannot fathom? Why not trees of unimaginable beauty, their blossoms perfuming entire continents? Why not elements beyond earth, air, fire, and water? 4 elements, only 4, to sustain the endless diversity of life. How pitiful, how mean. Why not 40? Why not 400? Ah, this world is poorly designed, cobbled together with a crude hand, as if an impatient craftsman abandoned it before it could reach its glory. The elephant, the hippopotamus, how they lumber with power. The camel, a marvel of adaptability. Yet what are these compared to the possibility of perfection? Imagine a butterfly, not the tiny jewel we know, but a vast and celestial being, its wings spanning the heavens. I dream of such a creature, soaring from star to star, perfuming the cosmos with the harmony of its flight. And the inhabitants of those distant worlds would gaze in wonder, lost in its beauty. But what is this madness? These visions are not my own. They are his. The Horla has invaded my thoughts, entwining his will with mine. He is within me, whispering, compelling me to dream his dreams. But I will not succumb. I will kill him. August 20th. I will kill him. I have seen him. Last night I sat at my table, pretending to write with great intent, though my every nerve was taut with anticipation. I knew he would come, would creep near as he always does, drawn by my false stillness. And then, when he was close enough, I would strike. Desperation would give me strength. I would use my hands, my knees, my teeth, if I must, to tear him apart, to end him. I prepared my room with meticulous care, lighting 2 lamps and 8 wax candles on the mantelpiece. I thought, perhaps foolishly, that this blaze of light might expose him, force him into visibility. My old oak bed stood across from me, its dark columns casting long shadows. To my right was the fireplace, its embers faint. To my left, the door, which I had left ajar for a time, baiting him, before carefully closing it. Behind me loomed the wardrobe, its tall mirror reflecting the room and myself within it. I knew its glass might reveal what my eyes could not. I bent over my papers, feigning concentration, but my senses were alive, electric. I knew he was watching me, as I watched for him. And then I felt it. A presence, a certainty, a weight in the air beside me. He was there, just behind me, his breath almost grazing my ear, reading over my shoulder. I froze, my blood thrumming in my veins. The moment had come. I rose so violently, hands outstretched, that I nearly fell. And then, horror. The room was ablaze with light, the lamps and candles filling every corner, yet the mirror showed nothing. I was not there. My reflection, that simple proof of existence, was gone. The glass, clear and pristine from top to bottom, held only emptiness where I should have been. I stared at it, my gaze unsteady, my breath caught in my chest. I dared not move, certain that he was there, that he had stolen my image, absorbed it into his imperceptible form. Terror clawed at me. And then, like the lifting of a veil, I began to see myself again, dim and blurred at first, as if through a fog. It was like watching water flow over my reflection, shifting slowly from left to right, until my outline sharpened, the mist receding. It was as though the end of an eclipse had revealed me once more. At last I stood fully visible in the glass, as I always had. Yet the horror of what I had seen, of what had obscured me, lingers still, a shudder that will not leave my body. August 21st. How can I kill him when I cannot even grasp him? Poison? No, he would see me mix it, and who can say if human poisons would have any effect on his intangible form? No, that will not do. But then how? August 22nd. I summoned a blacksmith from Rouen and ordered iron shutters for my windows and a door reinforced like those used in Parisian hotels to guard against thieves. Let them think me a coward. I care not. I will take no chances. September 10th. Rouen, Hôtel Continental. It is done. It is done. But is he dead? My mind is a storm, battered by what I have seen, by what I have done. Yesterday, with the locksmith's work completed, the iron shutters and door in place, I left everything open until midnight. The air grew cold as the hours passed, but I waited, knowing he would come. And then I felt him. I felt his presence, subtle but unmistakable, and a wild joy seized me. I moved about the room casually, pacing to and fro to lull him into complacency, to keep him from suspecting my plan. I removed my boots, replaced them with slippers, pretending nonchalance. Then, with deliberate care, I fastened the iron shutters, locking them tight. At last, I turned to the door. Quickly I secured it with a double lock and slipped the key into my pocket. And then I felt it. His panic. He moved restlessly around me, his unseen form agitated. He ordered me to let him out, his will pressing against mine. I nearly obeyed, but I resisted, holding firm. Backing out of the room, I opened the door just enough for my tall frame to pass through. My head brushed the lintel, and I knew he had not escaped. I had trapped him. He was alone, locked within. The elation was overwhelming. I had him fast. I descended to the drawing room below, trembling with exhilaration. There I seized the two lamps, pouring their oil across the furniture and carpets, dousing the room in flammable fuel. When everything was ready, I struck the flame and watched as fire took hold, its hunger spreading with terrible swiftness. I locked the door behind me, securing it against him, and fled into the night. I hid at the bottom of the garden, crouched among the laurel bushes. The wait was interminable. Darkness pressed heavy and suffocating, the air thick with stillness. The clouds hung low, invisible but oppressive, bearing down on my spirit like a weight I could not lift. I waited, my heart pounding in the silence, for the end to come. I stared at my house, waiting, the minutes stretching into an eternity. Doubts began to creep in, whispering that the fire had died out of its own accord, or worse, that he had extinguished it. Then at last a lower window shattered under the force of the flames, and a long, languid sheet of red fire unfurled itself against the white wall, rising gently, almost lovingly, to the roof. The light spilled outward, staining the trees, their branches trembling as though seized by some primal fear. The birds awoke in a cacophony of alarm. Somewhere a dog howled, its cries cutting through the night. Tee. The fire transformed the darkness, casting its glow as if heralding a premature dawn. Then 2 more windows exploded outward, shards of glass raining down like falling stars, and the entire lower floor of the house became a raging furnace. I watched, my breath held, and then came the sound, a shriek that tore through the night, high and piercing, a cry that was both human and not. It was a woman's cry, raw and terrible, and I saw the garret windows fly open. I had forgotten the servants. Their faces appeared pale and stricken with terror, their arms flailing in desperation. Horror consumed me. My triumph, my plan, turned to ash in my mouth. I fled toward the village, shouting, "Fire! Fire! Help!" My cries echoed in the still night, and soon I met others, villagers who had already seen the distant glow and were running to aid. Together we returned, but by then my house was nothing but a towering pyre. The fire was a monstrous thing, a grotesque and magnificent funeral blaze that lit the countryside with its fury. It was a pyre for men, and for him, the Horla, my prisoner, my tormentor, the new master. I stood transfixed as the roof collapsed in a roar of flame and timber, and a volcano of fire erupted into the sky. Through every shattered window, I saw the inferno devouring all within. My mind clung to the thought that he was there, trapped in the kiln of his destruction, consumed at last. Dead. Could he be dead? But doubt, relentless and cruel, crept into my thoughts. Could his body, so unlike ours, truly be destroyed by fire? Transparent, intangible. Surely it was impervious to the forces that would rend and ruin mortal flesh. If he were not dead, then what had I accomplished? Perhaps time alone holds sway over such a being, this invisible, fearsome thing that seems more spirit than flesh. Why would a body so elusive, so unfathomable, be subject to the same frailties as ours? His existence seemed beyond the grasp of infirmity. His destruction something that could come only at the appointed end of his span. Premature destruction, that is the root of all human terror. Man lives under the constant shadow of death, his end ever uncertain, ever near, as fleeting as a single breath. But the Horla, he is different. He exists beyond the reach of chance and accident. He will die only at his hour, at his moment, when he reaches the bounds of his existence. No, he is not dead. I know it. And so there remains but one course, one escape from his dominion. If I cannot destroy him, then I must destroy myself.